Her husband married her only to destroy her. But what happened next will shock you. From love to betrayal, flames to power. This is the story of a woman who faced heartbreak, loss, and ruin, yet used his fire to rise higher than anyone ever imagined. Don't miss this. The wedding of Noria Tembo and Ikenna Doba was the talk of Kasandu. Every influential person in the city was present: governors, diplomats, and wealthy business owners. The ceremony sparkled with gold and silk, most of it designed by Noria herself. Cameras flashed as the beautiful bride stood beside the charming young councilman. To outsiders, it looked like a union of love and power. Everyone admired them. People whispered with admiration, calling them the new face of Kasandu's elite. But while Noria smiled, holding her husband's hand tightly, Ikenna's smile held secrets. Noria had built her empire from the ground up. Orphaned at 13, she had learned sewing from her grandmother and turned that skill into a booming business. Tembo Silks was the pride of the city, and she was known for her creativity, discipline, and heart. Her designs were bold, original, and always carried a message of strength. When she met Ikenna at a business conference, she thought fate had smiled on her again. He was charming, intelligent, and passionate about change. He spoke about improving Kasandu, helping small businesses, and lifting the poor. He supported her dreams, or so it seemed. Their romance moved fast. Ikenna showered her with attention. He visited her workshop often, praised her ideas, and introduced her to key political figures. Within months, he proposed. Noria said yes, believing she had found not just a partner in love, but in purpose. She thought they were building a legacy together, but deep inside Ikenna's heart, there was no love. He saw Noria not as a wife, but as a tool, a door into wealth and deeper power. Unknown to Noria, Ikenna had studied her life. He knew about her late father's hidden shares in valuable lands. He had already partnered with people who wanted control over her brand. Marrying her was a shortcut to everything he wanted: property, status, and silent control over one of the city's biggest fashion empires. And Noria, blinded by love, never questioned his intentions. The night of the wedding, as guests danced and toasted to their future, Ikenna stepped aside and took a quiet call. "Phase 1 is done," he whispered. "She's mine now." That moment was the beginning of a trap Noria didn't see coming. In the weeks that followed, Ikenna's attitude shifted subtly. He was still sweet in public, but distant in private. He started making suggestions about how she should run her brand. He insisted on handling legal documents and partnerships. Noria, still lost in the joy of being a new bride, trusted him completely. She had no idea she had just signed over access to her entire business holdings to her husband. Everyone celebrated their union as perfect, but in reality, it was a wedding dressed in gold, but rooted in betrayal. Noria had walked into a storm, dressed in silk, smiling with hope, never knowing the man she loved had married her only to destroy her. At first, the changes seemed small. A long-time client suddenly backed out of a big order. Another boutique that had once begged to carry Tembo silks quietly switched to a rival brand. Noria brushed it off as the usual ups and downs of business. But soon, the pattern grew too clear to ignore. Orders dried up. Loyal customers stopped returning her calls. Her best tailors left within weeks. All offered better jobs elsewhere. The studio that once buzzed with life now felt hollow. Noria's heart grew heavy with worry. She had built her fashion house with sweat and sacrifice. How could everything fall apart so fast? She stayed late at the shop, trying to contact clients, renegotiate deals, and rebuild trust. But doors that once opened with a smile now remained shut. Even her suppliers raised their prices or delayed deliveries. Nothing made sense. Desperate, she turned to Ikenna. One night over dinner, she poured out her fears, her eyes filled with frustration. "Something is wrong, Ikenna," she said. "This isn't normal competition. It feels like someone is attacking my business from the inside." Ikenna reached across the table, holding her hand gently. "Noria, love, you're just under pressure. This happens in business. Maybe someone new entered the market, but you're still the best. Let me handle some things for you. You focus on designing." His voice was calm and soothing, just like always. Noria wanted to believe him. She needed to believe her husband had her back, so she nodded, wiped her tears, and gave him more control, more access to her finances, more say in the contract. She thought she was protecting her brand, but she was handing over the keys to the same man quietly tearing it apart. What she didn't know was that Ikenna was working with Dahila, his ex-girlfriend, a sharp investor known for buying out businesses through manipulation. Every client that walked away had been offered better deals through companies secretly connected to her. Every staff member lured out was paid with funds traced back to Ikenna's silent partners. The sabotage was planned down to the smallest detail. Late at night, in a sleek apartment across town, Ikenna and Dahila laughed over glasses of wine. "She's so trusting," Dahila smirked. "And now?" Ikenna leaned back, smiling. "She has no clue I own 40% of her brand. Signed it over last month during that supplier agreement. One more move and Tembo Silks is mine." They toasted to their plan. To them, Noria was just a stepping stone, a bright woman blinded by love. She had no idea her empire was slowly being stolen, not by strangers but by the man she kissed goodnight and the woman he once loved. The curtains of Kasandu were beautiful, but behind them, betrayal played like a silent play, and Noria was its unsuspecting star. 3 months after their perfect wedding, Noria's world started to feel strange. Ikenna grew distant. He came home late, claiming long meetings with politicians, and spent more time away than with her. One afternoon, while heading to her favorite cafe, she saw Ikenna seated at a quiet corner table, not alone, but with Dahila. They sat close, speaking low, and smiling like people with shared secrets. Noria froze. She didn't approach them. Instead, she waited at home, heart pounding. That night, she confronted him. "Why were you with Dahila?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Ikenna laughed it off. "She's working on a city funding project. It's nothing personal, just business. Don't stress yourself." His tone was gentle, but something about his eyes felt cold. Noria wanted to believe him. She had married him for love. She told herself to trust her husband, but a heavy feeling settled in her chest. 2 weeks later, disaster struck. It was a quiet night. Noria had stayed late in her workshop, finalizing sketches for a fashion show that could relaunch Tembo Silks. She left after midnight, locking up carefully, as always. At dawn, a neighbor called her, voice trembling. "Noria, your shop. It's burning." She rushed out in slippers, barely able to breathe. Flames lit the early morning sky. Her life's work, her fabrics, designs, sewing machines, awards, everything turned to black smoke. The fire brigade worked for hours, but the damage was done. By sunrise, nothing remained. Noria stood across the street, numb with shock. Neighbors gathered in silence. Her hands shook. Tears ran down her face as she watched the heart of her dreams disappear into ashes. The fire chief approached gently, avoiding her eyes. "We don't know how it started. No sign of a gas leak. No faulty wiring. It's strange." Ikenna arrived hours later, cameras following him. He pulled Noria into a hug, whispering softly, "We'll rebuild, my love. You're stronger than this." To the crowd, he looked like a devoted husband, comforting his broken wife. But behind her back, out of sight of the cameras, a smile crept onto his face, a cold, satisfied smile. As the reporters took photos, he whispered under his breath, "One step closer." Noria clung to him, too shaken to notice the way his eyes scanned the damage with ease. To the world, it was a tragic accident, but to Ikenna, it was a plan executed perfectly. One by one, her pillars were falling, her clients, her staff, her shop, and now, her spirit. All he needed was her full surrender. He had no intention of saving Tembo Silks. He wanted to own it, and the fire was just another match in the slow burning of Noria's world. But deep inside those ashes, something else was beginning to stir. Something Ikenna hadn't planned for. Noria stood in the ruins of her dream, watching helplessly as her workers packed up what little was left. The fire had taken everything: fabrics, machines, customer records, even her rare silk collection from Mwanda. With no income and mounting bills, she was forced to shut down operations completely. Her studio on Abuko Avenue, once a landmark in Kasandu's fashion world, now stood empty, with blackened walls and shattered windows. She tried to hold on to her apartment, but weeks passed with no help from Ikenna. He kept making promises but never delivered. "I'm in budget meetings," he'd say. "The council's in crisis," he'd add, but she knew he was avoiding her. At night, she lay on the floor of her nearly bare living room, crying quietly, wondering how everything had changed so fast. Eventually, the landlord gave her notice. With no other option, Noria sold the apartment, the one place that still carried memories of her mother's last visit, of her wedding morning, of dreams and laughter. She packed her bags alone. No farewell dinner, no comforting embrace from the man she had loved. Ikenna didn't even ask where she was going. His silence was louder than any insult. But the final blow came days later. Noria visited the city's business registry office, hoping to file paperwork to protect her brand. The clerk frowned as he searched the database. Tembo Silks, he asked. That was bought last week by Zolo Exports. She froze. Who? Zolo Exports, he repeated. A logistics firm. They purchased your intellectual rights, trademarks, and remaining stock. Everything's legally theirs now. Her heart sank. She had never signed such a deal. She demanded to see the file. The documents looked official, too official. Her signature was there, perfectly copied. Her name, her logo, her life, gone with the stroke of a pen she never held. She began digging. Late into the night, using a friend's old laptop at a cafe, she traced Zolo Exports to a foreign bank account. That account, in turn, connected to a shell company registered under Ikenna Doba's name. Her husband, the same man who kissed her forehead before bed, the same man who held her as she cried after the fire. He had planned everything. She stared at the screen, fingers trembling, her breath caught in her throat. Ikenna hadn't just watched her fall. He had built the trap himself. The fire, the clients, the silence. It had all been steps in a plan to erase her and take her empire. That night, Noria didn't cry. She packed a single bag, withdrew her remaining savings, and boarded the last bus out of Kasandu. No goodbye, no note. She vanished like smoke, leaving behind a city that cheered her rise, ignored her fall, and never saw the storm she was becoming. What Kasandu didn't know was that Noria Tembo was not defeated. She had only gone quiet to rebuild, in a place where no one could see her rise until it was too late. In Kasandu, whispers filled the streets. Did you hear? Noria Tembo is dead. Some said she collapsed from grief. Others claimed she vanished into the forest. But far from the gossip and pity, Noria was alive. She now lived in the coastal city of Tunzari, a place full of colour, trade, and strangers who didn't know her name or past. She walked its narrow markets like any other woman, dressed simply, her once famous face now hidden beneath a scarf. She called herself Zubeidi Kassa now. She had changed her hairstyle, her walk, even her voice. No one would guess that the quiet young woman sketching patterns on brown paper at the back of a tailoring shop was once the queen of fashion in Kasandu. She worked for a kind seamstress named Mama Paza, who didn't ask questions. Zubeidi took measurements, hemmed sleeves, and carried fabric from market stalls to the shop, earning small coins, but more importantly, peace. But at night, when the city slept, Zubeidi became Noria again. She locked the door of her tiny rented room and spread her papers across the floor. With only a candle and her old silver pencil, she drew dresses, better than before. Designs that didn't just follow fashion, but told stories of betrayal, strength, and rebirth. Each sketch was a piece of her broken heart stitched into power. She researched local suppliers, contacted distant weavers under a fake email, and built a network quietly. Every week she saved a little from her earnings, one day for rent, one day for food, and the rest for her dream. She had nothing flashy, just drive and memory. Every time her hands shook, she reminded herself, they left me for dead. I'll make them regret it. Tunzari gave her space to breathe. No one called her weak. No cameras followed her. No one looked at her with pity. Here, she was just a woman starting from nothing, and she liked it. With each passing day, her steps grew firmer. Her sketches got sharper. Her silence, deeper. The fire that burned her old life now burned in her eyes, not as sorrow, but as purpose. One night, staring at the waves crashing along the coast, she whispered to the sea, "They tried to kill Noria Tembo, but I am still here. I won't just rise, I'll rule." That vow stayed with her like a drumbeat. She knew revenge wasn't just about pain, it was about power, true power, the kind that makes enemies watch in silence while you shine brighter than ever. And Noria wasn't coming back to beg. She was building something bigger, something Ikenna couldn't touch, couldn't steal, and couldn't stop. Kasandu thought it buried her, but it had only planted her. What would bloom next, no one was ready for. Not Ikenna, not Dahila, not even the city that once celebrated her and then turned away. Zubeidi Kassa was her armor, but Noria Tembo was the fire that would return to burn down everything false. The Tunzari Unity Expo was the biggest event in the coastal city, drawing attention from all across the continent. But no one expected the quiet seamstress named Zubeidi to shake the entire fashion world. When her collection hit the runway, there was a gasp in the room. Models wore bold cuts, rich colors, and patterns that screamed strength. The fabrics moved like waves, fierce and graceful, telling a silent story of survival and power. It was nothing like the usual designs seen at the expo. It was raw, different, and unforgettable. People didn't just watch, they felt it. Journalists whispered to each other, "Who is Zubeidi Kassa?" Her booth, tucked in a modest corner, suddenly overflowed with buyers. Orders came from all 5 surrounding regions, some from as far as the capital. Women lined up, saying her dresses made them feel alive, fearless, like queens. What they didn't know was that the hands behind those designs had once lost everything. And now, those same hands were rebuilding an empire. In just 2 weeks, her email inbox flooded with inquiries. Stylists begged to carry her line. Boutique owners offered shelf space. Influencers posted her outfits with no tags, trying to look exclusive. Investors came knocking. One offered to take her brand global. Another asked for a partnership deal. But Noria, still hiding behind the name Zubeidi, refused to rush. She remembered how power can turn into poison in the wrong hands. She said no to interviews, no to fame, no to fast deals. The media tried to find out who she really was, but Zubeidi gave nothing away. She kept her head down and worked harder. She registered a new company, Zubeidi Designs Limited, and made Mama Paza her silent partner out of gratitude. She expanded into a small rented studio and trained 3 girls from the village who reminded her of herself. She told them, "Design is not just fabric, it's truth. Never copy, always speak." Each launch sold out within hours. Her brand didn't follow trends, it made them. Bold shoulders, sharp lines, and deep, fearless colors. Every piece was like a declaration. Women wore her dresses to boardrooms, protests, weddings, and summits. Zubeidi wasn't just a name, it became a movement. And yet, Noria kept her real identity locked away like a secret weapon. She watched silently as her former world continued on, unaware. Ikena's name popped up once on a political blog, but she didn't click. She had no interest in watching him anymore. Not yet. Her focus was on her brand, her team, her purpose. Revenge would come, but it had to be dressed in success. Every time she stood before a mirror, wearing one of her new designs, she didn't see a victim anymore. She saw power. She saw someone reborn through fire and betrayal. And though the world was falling in love with Zubeidi Kassa, it had no idea that Noria Tembo was quietly rising from the ashes. This time, stronger, smarter, unstoppable. Ikena Doba had always believed he was untouchable. In Kasandu's corridors of power, his charm and ruthless plans had pushed him to the top. But now, everything was crumbling like dry clay. His secret export business, Zolo Exports, was under serious investigation. Officials had started digging into the fake company's accounts, uncovering lies, missing money, and suspicious transactions. The people who once praised Ikena now whispered behind closed doors, questioning his honesty and loyalty. Worse, Dahila, his secret partner and mistress, had vanished. No one knew where she was. Rumors said she had taken all the stolen funds and disappeared with the cash. Ikena's allies turned cold. He tried calling her, sending messages, but there was only silence. The betrayal stung deeper than any political attack. The city council, pressured by the scandal, suspended Ikena from his position. The headlines were brutal. Councilmen accused of corruption. Ikena's empire in shambles. Power couple's downfall. His carefully crafted image shattered overnight. People who once supported him turned away. Friends avoided his calls. His phone stopped ringing. Then came the whispers, quiet but persistent. "Have you seen the new designer in Tunzari? She's changing everything we thought about fashion. That Zubeidi Kassa is unstoppable." Some said she was a fresh face. Others swore they saw hints of an old queen rising. Ikena ignored the gossip until one day a magazine landed on his desk. The cover was glossy and bright. A tall model posed confidently in a gown unlike any he had seen before. The bold colors, the fierce design. It was unmistakably the work of Noria Tembo. His heart tightened. He stared at the picture, the name Zubeidi Designs glowing below the headline. Memories flooded back. Noria's smile, her passion, and the betrayal he had dealt her. For the first time, Ikena felt the weight of his mistakes. His enemies whispered, "She's the one who got away." He felt exposed, weak, and defeated. Kasandu's streets buzzed with talk of Zubeidi's rise and his fall. People were beginning to realize that the woman he tried to destroy was now his fiercest rival. The tables had turned. Ikena's power, built on lies and greed, was slipping through his fingers like sand. His days were filled with meetings that went nowhere, phone calls that ended in silence, and sleepless nights haunted by the truth he tried to bury. He wondered how things had changed so fast. The city that once crowned him now watched him fall. And all the while, the mysterious designer from Tunzari kept growing stronger, her shadow stretching across Kasandu's skyline. Ikena's empire was collapsing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The fire he used to burn Noria had only sparked a blaze that would consume him. The game was no longer his. It belonged to the woman he betrayed, the woman who had turned pain into power and was ready to take back everything. The night of the Kasandu Council Gala arrived, shimmering with grandeur and buzzing with the city's elite. The grand hall was filled with powerful politicians, wealthy investors, and socialites, all dressed in their finest. This year, the gala promised something special. The closing runway show was set to be hosted by Zubeidi Designs, the rising star everyone whispered about but barely knew. No one expected what was about to unfold. As the lights dimmed, a hush fell over the crowd. The music began, a bold and vibrant rhythm that matched the fierce energy of the designs on the runway. Models paraded elegant, daring outfits that broke the city's old-fashioned rules. The audience watched, captivated by the fresh, confident style that challenged tradition and celebrated strength. Then, from behind the curtain, a woman appeared. She moved with grace and power, the room immediately recognizing her. Noria Tembo, the woman thought lost, the one who had disappeared after tragedy. She was alive, radiant, and commanding every eye. Whispers swept through the crowd. Gasps echoed as the realization sank in. Noria had returned. Ikena, seated at the front, felt his throat tighten. His hands trembled as he choked on his drink, unable to look away. His carefully constructed world was crashing down before him. The woman he tried to destroy was standing right there, stronger than ever. Noria stepped onto the stage, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the silence. "You tried to burn me," she said, her eyes locking with Ikena's, "but I used your fire to rise." The words echoed through the hall, powerful and undeniable. The crowd erupted into applause, many standing to honor the woman who had not only survived, but conquered. Cameras flashed, capturing every moment of her triumphant return. Behind her smile was a story of pain and betrayal, but also of courage and resilience. The fire that consumed her past had forged a new identity, Zubeidi Designs, one that symbolized rebirth and strength. The designs on the runway were more than fashion. They were a statement that Noria was back to reclaim her place. Ikena's face paled as the room shifted around him. Whispers turned to murmurs of admiration for Noria, and questions about his fall. The power he once held slipped from his grasp like smoke. He realized that the woman he tried to break had become the city's brightest star. The gala ended with thunderous applause and a standing ovation for Noria Tembo. Her story, once hidden in shadows, now shone brightly for all to see. She had risen from the ashes of betrayal and burned past the darkness that once held her captive. That night marked the beginning of a new era in Kasandu, one led by a woman who turned her greatest pain into her greatest power. The city would never forget the moment Noria Tembo walked onto that stage and declared her victory over the fire that once tried to destroy her. Days after the stunning gala, Ikena's world began to crumble faster than anyone expected. Investigations into his corrupt dealings intensified. Evidence piled up, revealing a trail of fraud, embezzlement, and betrayal that shocked Kasandu. The city that once praised him as a rising star now saw him as a fallen man. Within a week, police arrested Ikena. His properties were frozen and seized, leaving him stripped of power and influence. The man who had tried to destroy Noria was now a criminal in disgrace. Meanwhile, Noria was quietly rebuilding her life. She moved swiftly to reclaim what was rightfully hers: her name, her brand, her dignity. Legal battles followed, but with her sharp mind and steadfast determination, Noria won every fight. The courts restored her ownership of her empire, but this time, she didn't just want her old business back. She rebranded it with a new vision and a new name: Tembo Zubeidi Global. It was a bold statement, merging her past and her rebirth, symbolizing strength, renewal, and global ambition. Her new brand was more than fashion, it became a movement. Noria launched a fashion school dedicated to young women in Kasandu and beyond. She knew firsthand how harsh the world could be, especially for women fighting for their dreams. The school wasn't just about sewing or designing, It was about resilience, empowerment, and purpose. She taught her students to wear their pain as armor and transform every setback into a step forward. Her story became a beacon of hope for many. Women who had once felt powerless found strength in her journey. From heartbreak to triumph, from ashes to glory, Noria's empire was no longer just a business. It was a community built on courage, creativity, and compassion. She poured her energy into mentoring and uplifting others, using fashion as a language to rewrite stories. Remarkably, Noria never mentioned Ikenna's name again. She refused to give power to the man who tried to break her. Instead, she focused on the future, her future, and the future of every young woman who walked through her school's doors. The past was a lesson, but it wasn't her story anymore. Power now flowed through her fingers in threads of silk and ambition, not through the empty promises of politics. Tembo Zubeidi Global quickly gained international attention, with collaborations and showcases across Africa and beyond. Noria's designs spoke of heritage and innovation, a fusion that captured hearts worldwide. Yet, she remained grounded, remembering the woman she was before the fire and the woman she had become after it. The redemption of Noria Tembo was not just about reclaiming wealth or fame. It was about rising with grace and using pain as fuel for greatness. She showed everyone that true power lies not in control over others, but in control over oneself, in purpose, and in lifting others as you climb. In Kasandu, Noria was no longer just a name whispered in gossip or a victim of betrayal. She was a queen in her own right, strong, independent, and unstoppable. The woman who had been burned was now the woman who rebuilt, inspiring generations to come. Years after the storm of betrayal and heartbreak, Noria Tembo stood on a grand stage, bathed in the warm glow of thousands of lights. The city of Kasandu was gathered to honor her as Woman of the Century, an award recognizing not only her incredible success in fashion, but the strength and resilience she had shown through every trial. The room was silent as she stepped to the microphone, the weight of her journey clear in her calm, confident voice. She began by sharing a truth many needed to hear. Some people marry you to break you. Those words hung heavy in the air. Everyone knew her story, the lies, the destruction, the betrayal that came disguised as love. But she continued, "Your purpose is not tied to their betrayal. Use their fire." She spoke not as a victim, but as a woman who had transformed pain into power. Let it mold you, let it crown you. Her eyes shone with quiet fire. A woman who had risen from ashes far too many times to count. The audience watched, captivated, as she revealed the meaning behind her choice of dress for the night. It was stitched with delicate phoenix feathers, a symbol of rebirth, strength, and endless resilience. That dress told the story better than words ever could. It was her armor and her crown. Noria was no longer the young bride who had walked into a marriage filled with hidden dangers. She was a queen, reborn in flames, fierce and unbreakable. The same city that once whispered of her downfall now cheered for her rise. Her legacy was no longer just about fashion or wealth. It was about a spirit that refused to be defeated. Walking off the stage, Noria held her head high, knowing her journey had touched hearts far beyond Kasandu. She was proof that even when life tries to burn you down, you can use that very fire to build your throne. Her story inspired countless women, reminding them that their strength is born not from avoiding the fire, but from learning to rise from it, time and time again. In that moment, Noria Tembo wasn't just a woman who survived. She was a queen who had mastered the flames. If you felt broken or betrayed, remember Noria's story, that even the deepest pain can become the fire that fuels your rise. Life may try to burn you down, but within you lies the power to rebuild, stronger and more radiant than before. Don't let anyone's betrayal define your future. Let their fire be the spark that lights your path to greatness. Every challenge you face is not the end, but a chance to rise again, just like Noria did. Your strength isn't in avoiding the flames, but in learning to dance through them and come out victorious. Believe in yourself, no matter how hard the storm. You are meant to shine, to inspire, and to become the queen or king of your own life. If Noria's journey touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this story with someone who needs hope today. Hit the like button if you believe in rising from ashes, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales that remind us all that no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey of courage and strength. Together, we rise.